Gila County Attorney. I first met Bradley when he was running for CD1 Congress. Hey, back there. Settle down. Okay, so I first met Bradley in 2010 when he was running for Congress for CD1, but then Paul Gosar beat him out along, because there were 9 people running, right?
There were.
There were 9 people. And we, you know, some of us were favoring Bradley, and then all of a sudden, there was Paul. So anyhow, but then in 2012, I believe, you were elected county attorney.
Correct.
So now he has had 2 4-year terms?
Almost.
Almost.
This is the 3rd year of my second 4-year term, so I'd serve next year.
Yeah,
and
so
then if I'm reelected, then it would be 4 more.
4 more years.
After
Okay,
2020.
and that's the same with Sadie also. She got elected in 2012 also, right?
No, she got elected.
Oh, 2008. So you're a long-lived county recorder. Okay, good. All righty. So I would like to have Bradley share with you what he thinks of all this impeachment deal. And I personally want you to address what is CrowdStrike and what is exculpatory evidence somewhere, because I don't usually get to ask questions, the other people do.
I don't want this.
Oh, he doesn't want that. Now, is there, Charlie, are you going to be okay?
Where's Charlie?
Charlie's right here.
Right here? Oh,
Charlie, well, he doesn't want to use the microphone, so are you going to be able to hear him?
No. Yeah, probably, yeah.
Are other people?
Give us a sample.
Give us a sample.
well, it usually starts like this, but it gets a little bit louder as we go, as we get a
Okay.
little more fired up on the impeachment and what's actually happening in our country. I'll tend to get a little fired up, and normally when I would have to go into court and I would talk, they'd always tell me from court administration, you need to keep it down a little bit. And I said, well, I apologize. I get a little passionate about what I do, and I can't really pull that back. That's just the way it is.
Welcome to the club.
And I've coached football, varsity football now for almost 25 years, and the kids always tell me, you're the only coach we ever had that we can't get away with. I couldn't hear you out on the field. You hear me, the other team hears me, the people at the Circle K down the road hear me, everybody hears me when it comes to that. Well, you know, when you're dealing with impeachment, it's kind of sad, really, what's happening. And it would be equally sad if it was the Republican Party doing this to a Democrat president. It really would. This is no longer an issue of political party, of left, right, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. This is right and wrong. And this is just simply wrong. It is not supported by the law. It is not supported by the Constitution. And if I have to hear Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff or Senator Chuck Schumer or the rest of them start talking about how they feel bad about it's the Constitution and we're really trying to uphold the Constitution, the best favor they could do for the United States Constitution is to resign immediately, because what they're doing is an embarrassment. And it's an embarrassment across the board. Now, Bill Clinton was impeached. And I didn't agree with that. What he did was wrong. And what he did was he committed, I think it was 11 felonies. He committed 11 felonies. However, the 11 felonies he committed did not imperil the United States of America. Impeachment is for exactly what it says: treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And I can only imagine that the founders' intent was that those high crimes and misdemeanors would be associated with crimes like treason and bribery. And the bribery was not the President of the United States bribing another country to do something. The bribery in question was another country bribing the President of the United States to do their bidding. That's what they were worried about. And that goes all the way back. Those concerns were well-founded back in 1787 when they were all sitting in a room hashing out the United States Constitution. And I have a pretty good idea of what everybody said at the Constitutional Convention, because I have 5 volumes on my bookshelf at my house, and out of the over 1,100 books that are in my personal library at my home, these are the 5 that do not get loaned to anybody. And it is the minutes to the Constitutional Convention. I can tell you what every single person said, every word they said, 232 years ago. You don't have to tell me what their intent is. I can read it. I can tell you exactly what they said. In fact, I brought a quote tonight, and I just tell you, but I wrote it down. I wrote it big so I wouldn't have to wear my glasses. Surely, next time this big. And I'll probably still wear them. But I wanted to make sure I got it correctly. And the gentleman that the quote comes from is the same gentleman that Nancy Pelosi quoted. Or should I say misquoted? Should I say misrepresented? Because she liked to think that Governor Morris, who was a founder, believed that impeachment was great. That's what she said. Governor Morris said, we've got to have impeachment. This is why we have to have it. And I'm going to read this at the end to you. And when I read it, I just want you to think about today, what's going on. And then read the words, and these are the exact words, and I know they are because President Madison's the one who wrote them down. He was the secretary for the convention. He's the one who wrote everything down. And it is exactly what he said. And when you read it, we were in the vehicle driving up, and I gave it to Sadie. We rode up together, and I said, here, read this, and tell me if you think this sounds like what we're doing today. And she read it, and she was like, I cannot. Are you serious? And this guy said it 232 years ago. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, and Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution are what they call the impeachment clauses. These are the areas of the Constitution that deal directly with impeachment. Article 1, Section 2 talks about how the House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker. And when they choose their Speaker, they also have the sole power of impeachment. That's in Article 1, Section 2. Article 1, Section 3, you're dealing with the United States Senate and what their powers are. And that's where you get that the Senate has to sit on a trial when it's the President of the United States. For impeachment, the Senate sits. They sit under oath or affirmation. They sit and they hear the testimony. And they make their decision. The founders were geniuses because they actually put in there that it takes a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate to remove a president from office. And that in instances where it's the United States, the President of the United States who is being impeached, then the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court shall preside over the proceedings. How am I doing so far? I got it?
You haven't even gotten into
Okay.
it.
It's at the front part. So this is the important stuff. When I always teach people the Constitution, they always go to the amendments, and I always tell them, no, you're missing the good stuff. All the good stuff's in all those other articles you don't want to read. The amendment's kind of the neat stuff where you can say, Second Amendment, I have a Fourth Amendment right from protection of illegal search and seizure. It's the other ones that's important, what's in really the meat of the Constitution. And so the United States Senate is the one who sits. If the president is convicted, he cannot hold a position of profit or honor in any civil office ever if he's removed. So you just simply can't do it. And removing the president is so the president can then be prosecuted, because you can't prosecute a sitting member. You can't prosecute the president of the United States while he's sitting in office. So impeachment was designed to remove the president from office so that he or she could then be prosecuted for whatever offense they committed.
Criminal or civil.
And then Article 3, Section 1 is the United States Supreme Court. That's the article that deals with the courts, and that just indicates that the United States Supreme Court and really all federal judges sit for a term of good behavior, which means life. As long as they don't do anything wrong. It's a lifetime appointment. And this is kind of where I get a little, if we can just move a little bit off impeachment, this is where you start to develop your problems. Because if you can show me in the Constitution where it says that the United States Supreme Court has the power and authority to deem a piece of legislation unconstitutional, I'd love for you to point that out to me. Because it's not in there. Because they don't have that power. That was never given to them. They actually gave that power to themselves. In the case of Marbury versus Madison, Justice Marshall, genius, gave the Supreme Court the power to determine whether something's constitutional or unconstitutional in a term he called judicial review. That was never granted to him. So now I ask everybody, what's the most important decision a president will make in their time in office?
Judges.
Supreme Court judges. Why? Why?
They live forever.
They do tend to live forever. But why is that the most important thing? Why is it not all the other things? Why is it not making sure that we pass laws and usher legislation through to take care of our veterans? Because I see so many veterans in the room. Why isn't that the most important thing he'll do or she will do? Why isn't it making sure that we have a tax schedule in the country that's beneficial for everyone? Why is it pick a justice to the United States Supreme Court? And the answer is because the justices of the United States Supreme Court, it only takes 5 of them. And they can undo everything. Where does that rest? Where did they get that? Where is that written?
It's not.
That they can do that. So when you drafted the Constitution and you put that they can serve for a term of good behavior, you gave a branch of government a lifetime appointment. A lifetime appointment that was never intended to be able to have the power to completely eliminate all the work the other 2 branches that were elected by the people and by the Electoral College. It was never intended for them just to come in and say, nope, we're just simply not going to let you do that because now you live in a judicial oligarchy. Can't have that. That's what we have now. That's what this whole election is. The 2016 election was to who we're going to put on the Supreme Court. That's all it was. It was the same thing when President Obama was elected. I didn't vote for him twice. I didn't. He was still my president. It always bothers me when people say, he's not my president. Well, I don't know where you live. But he is. You may not like him, you may not support him, you may not have voted for him, but he's your president of the United States, and you have to respect the office. And I always refer to him as President Obama. Some people will just say Obama. It bothers me. That man earned a title. That man earned a title, and out of respect for the office of the President of the United States, you refer to him as President Obama, just like you refer to him as President Trump. I didn't like people calling him Trump. I didn't like it when no Republican liked it when they referred to him as Bush and not President Bush. Well, how's it any different? It's not okay simply because, but as long as we're doing it to the other party, that makes it okay. Because that's why we're where we are today with impeachment. They're impeaching the president for 2 things: abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Neither of which is a crime. There is no crime there. 0. Obstruction of Congress is because they subpoenaed stuff and the president said, we're not doing it. And I don't have to do it. And I have a pretty good reason why I think I don't have to comply with your subpoena. Just to let you know, this goes on every day in the country. In every court with your run-of-the-mill citizen. If a subpoena is issued to you, you can hire a lawyer and fight the subpoena and say, I'm not giving it to you. And the remedy is it goes to court, and the courts say, we've heard everything. Sir, you do. You have to comply. We disagree with your argument, and you have to comply with that subpoena. And that's all the president said. We're not complying. Let's take it to court. And the Congress said, and they said this. I don't make this up. They actually say this on television. We don't have time for this to go to court. We're going to impeach him now for it. What do you mean you don't have time? Oh, that's right, because that harkens back to the other congressman who said, if we don't impeach the president, he's going to be reelected. See, that's why they're running out of time. That's why that's so important, to have it done as quick as they can. So you're going to get him for abuse of power, for not complying with a subpoena that we're all allowed to do. That's your obstruction of Congress. Your abuse of power is simply because he contacted the Ukraine on a phone call that we all read the transcript to, that he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, when the president of the Ukraine says, no, I felt pretty good about the conversation. He wasn't bullying me at all. Well, your extortion argument's out the window now because nobody's been threatened by force, threat of force, or anything like that. So you're gone. You don't have an extortion claim anymore. You don't have a bribery claim because nothing changed hands. Nobody said anything. In fact, everybody and their uncle said there was no quid pro quo. Nobody wanted anything for anything. And the worst part of it is you only had one guy who had firsthand knowledge, and he actually said the president made it very clear that there was to be no quid pro quo. What are we doing here? That's pretty simple. And then you bring on 47 other witnesses who testify everything to the fact of, and anything that personally upset them. I mean, my favorite one was the ambassador to the Ukraine. I'm sure she's a nice lady. I'm sure she did a decent job, but the President of the United States is allowed to fire those people whenever he wants.
Exactly.
He's just allowed to do that. When I got elected as county attorney, I could have walked in the door on day one and I could have fired every lawyer in the building because they are not protected by the county merit policy. That's one group that I can just get rid of anytime I want. I don't even need a reason. I can just be like, sir, not a fan of the sweater. Have a good day. That's it. You're just going down the road. Now, you're an idiot if you do that because you move in there and you take over and you want to look at everybody who's in the office. You want to work with them. You want to see who you've got. You want to do evaluations. You want to see if you've got people who are going to be team players. You want to see if you have people who are going to support just the person who's in the chair and running the office, or people who are going to support the actual integrity of the office. So you don't do that. Some people did do that. I had other county attorneys in other counties that wiped out large portions of their office. To me, that was ridiculous. And I had people in my office who were afraid I was going to do that. And I had to tell them, that's the dumbest thing I could do. I'm not doing that. But whether I can or not, it's not a crime if I do. The president's allowed to do it just like I was allowed to do it. He can do that. These people actually testified that he was mean to me. I mean, it's unbelievable what some of this testimony, and I tried to watch it, and believe me, that's hard to watch. That's hard to watch, folks. If you think it's hard to watch those impeachment hearings and not want to climb through the television, and it just drove me nuts. But that's what their argument is. We're impeaching President Trump. The Congress is impeaching the President Trump because we don't like him. That's not impeachable. It's okay to not be liked. Everybody doesn't have to like you. No one can tell you why. If you watch some of the hearings, they brought these 3 constitutional lawyers in, or there's 4 of them. That's just hard. I'm going to tell you. I watched that. I was like, oh wow, this is the best we have right here. This nice lady, and I'm sure she's a nice lady, and she's a Stanford law professor, and that's great. But I mean, I'll be honest. I weep for what we're learning at Stanford. If that's what we're marching out here to tell me how it goes, that's embarrassing. And they asked him point blank, "Can any of you tell me what law the President of the United States has violated?" And they all sat there because there is none. Now, you are the Democrat. Number one, just to start, I don't know how impeachment ever begins in the House Intelligence Committee. That's done in the Judiciary Committee.
That's an oxymoron.
Because that's where all the lawyers are, and we're doing a legal thing. You might want to do that. But instead we went over to House Intel. And we went to House Intel for a reason. Because Adam Schiff planted the evidence, Adam Schiff discovered the evidence, Adam Schiff prosecuted the evidence, and Adam Schiff rendered a decision on the evidence. That should horrify everyone that happened. I don't care what political party you are. That should bother you. This man's a Korean War veteran sitting right here. Pretty sure that's not the idea you had of government when they sent you over there to South Korea to fight the communists. I doubt that was the whole idea behind it, was do this so we can just impeach anybody if we don't like them. It just doesn't work that way. It's embarrassing. It's an affront to everyone. My brother is finishing his 30th year in the Marine Corps as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, and he's embarrassed. He said, "I'm embarrassed that our country is impeaching a President of the United States for nothing because we just simply don't like him." And that was one of the things the founders were concerned about when they argued impeachment. There's pages and pages, and the print's really small in the minutes where they're arguing impeachment, and they're talking about whether it's necessary or not, and what their fears are with impeachment. And just to help Shirley out, exculpatory just means evidence. Basically, it's evidence that's going to be beneficial to the other party. For example, if I'm prosecuting Bill for an assault, and I find out that Bill was in Toledo the night that it happened, I have an ethical obligation to give that information to his lawyer and say, yeah, your guy wasn't here, and then I'm going to dismiss the case because that's just dumb. It's not him. It's clear. That's what exculpatory is. If we get somebody for a DUI and they take their breathalyzer and they end up blowing zeros, I have to let the defense attorney know. That's exculpatory evidence. That helps prove that they didn't commit the offense. So that's all that is. It's just, and everybody has an ethical obligation to do that. As a lawyer, we have to do that. Believe it or not, we have rules of ethics. I know, don't chuckle. Every time I tell people that, they go, yeah, right, come on. I like the fact that you can get charged for lying to Congress, but Congress can lie to everybody. I enjoy that one the most. They're like, you know, you've lied to me, we're going to put you in prison, sir. And it's like, you've lied to me 14 times. Today, just before lunch. So when you have exculpatory evidence, you have to give that up. You have to present that. And President Trump did a wonderful thing when Adam Schiff said, we need to know what the whistleblower said. Number one, he's not a whistleblower. Let's cover that. Legally, he's not a whistleblower. He's not covered by statute for it, period. But he said, you know, we need to know what the whistleblower is going to say. And then President Trump went, well, here, I'll just tell you what I said. Here's the whole transcript. And that, they didn't know what to do. Because what they really planned on doing was having the president not give up the transcript, and then we could play up the he's got something to hide thing for a couple of months, call him all kinds of names. That guy's been called a criminal. That guy's been called a spy. That guy's been called a Nazi. That guy's been called a Russian asset. And that guy's been accused of treason. That guy was also, the wheels were in motion to impeach him the day after he was elected. He wasn't even in office yet. And they said, well, we're going to start the impeachment process. How does that even... And then you get up to the podium and you do this is a solemn time and a solemn moment.
And we pray.
I'm supposed to buy that? You've been trying to impeach this guy before he was the president. And you want me to believe now that your heart's in the right place and this isn't partisan at all. Now, mind you, when you look at other impeachments that happened, you had Bill Clinton, who committed, I believe, 11 felonies, and that is not in dispute. Even the Democrats agreed that Bill Clinton committed 11 felonies. And his felonies were that he lied under oath. Now, I'm not a big fan of what he did. We all know what he did. We all know where he did it, which is an affront because Ronald Reagan wouldn't even take his suit jacket off in the Oval Office. Bill Clinton can't get his pants on in the Oval Office. I mean, that's really, if you want to know, just a couple differences in the party group. And he did it, and he lied about it. But did he put the country in peril? No. Was there a danger? No. Did he commit treason for doing it? No. Did he commit bribery or anything? No. Should it have been used against him when he wanted to run for re-election or anything like that? Yes. Yeah. That's when you do it. That's when you bring that up. You don't impeach. So I disagreed. And the House impeached him, and the Senate cleared him. He didn't get enough votes to convict him. Because everybody thinks, and tomorrow you're going to run into these people. Just don't laugh right at them, because it's not their fault. They just don't understand it. Don't laugh right at them. But they're going to say, yeah, we impeached him, he's gone. And they're going to say that, and that's not how it works. Impeaching someone is like being charged with a crime. I charged Bill with a crime. That's like we've impeached Bill. Now we're going to do the trial on Bill's case. That's what the Senate does. So impeachment is simply, we're charging you with this. Now we're going to let the Senate convict you or not so that they can vote. We can determine whether you'll be removed from office. We've only had 2 presidents impeached in the history of the country. Bill Clinton was one. Who was the other one? Andrew Johnson. Nixon was not impeached. Nixon resigned before he was... Nixon was going to be impeached. In my opinion, Nixon would have not only been impeached, Nixon would have been convicted in the Senate. I think Nixon would have actually been removed from office. And I think the reason he resigned is because people like Senator Goldwater went to him and said, you got to go. You're done. They're going to get you. You've done this. And when the House met and they were debating whether or not what articles of impeachment they were going to bring on Nixon, you had Democrats in the House of Representatives that actually went back to their office and cried. They cried because they were about to. They knew they were going to impeach the President of the United States. It brought tears to some of these people that they were about to do this. And President Nixon did what he did. He did it. I mean, his heart may have been in the right place. He may have had reasons why he did it, but you did what you did. He would have lost. But it moved them to tears. They didn't want to do this. And when some of them were asked later, that's what they said. We just didn't want to. I didn't come to Congress to impeach the President of the United States. It really bothered them that they were going to do it. Now it's a party. Now it's something to celebrate. Now you've got every other media outlet out there. And I've tried to watch them. I'm not just a guy that watches Fox News and goes, oh, the heck with MSNBC. No, I try to watch it. I try. It's like trying to get along with that family member that nobody gets along with. And you're at Christmas and you're like, all right, I'm just going to go over and talk to them. Right? And after a couple minutes, you walk by whoever else is in the family, you go, well, I tried. That's what it's like. And I'm watching MSNBC and it's horrible. And sometimes I'll have my TV on at night and I'll fall asleep. And sometimes I'll watch MSNBC to watch like Dateline and stuff like that, the old stuff. Because apparently I don't get enough crime in my life. I watch it on television. And I'll do that, and about 4 in the morning I'll wake up and the TV's on, and they're bad-mouthing the President of the United States at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's how I know Dateline's over, because we're talking about the President again. And every time you turn those news stations on, that's all you hear. And some of the things they say, I don't understand it. They're actually now talking about the President of the United States, if President Trump, he's going to run for a 3rd term, and if he gets reelected, he's given the military these raises so that the military will protect him to serve a 3rd term. Like, this is where we are at this point. I don't even understand that. I don't know if they have drug testing in Congress, but some of those people need to get in there by Thursday. They come up with some stuff that I don't even know where your brain is. But that's what they do. Andrew Johnson was impeached over it was an act in 1867. And it was an act that protected, I can't remember what the act was now, but the act was really made to protect Secretary of War Stanton. Johnson was not a big ally of Lincoln's. When Lincoln died and Johnson took over, everybody always says, I wonder how Reconstruction of the South would have gone had President Lincoln still been alive. And I think it would have gone a lot smoother and it would have gone a lot better. But it didn't. And when Andrew Johnson took over, he was having cabinet meetings and he was discussing things, things that he wanted to do. And Congress really wanted to know what was happening. And Secretary of War Stanton was their guy. He's like, I'll tell you. And Johnson found out about it. And so they passed this act, and I can't remember what it is, but they passed it in 1867. And it was basically to protect Andrew Johnson. You can't fire you can't fire Secretary of War Stanton. That's what it was designed to do. And Johnson dismissed him. Which a president has the right to dismiss a cabinet member, yes.
I think it was Reconstruction, wasn't it?
No,
Abe Lincoln was big on Reconstruction.
Well, he was.
And Johnson wanted to punish the South.
Right. Well, Johnson was kind of a little more of a Southern sympathizer. And so that's where you had your... But they were... And I can't remember what the act was.
It was the Indians also. It was the tribal lands.
It begins with a C, and I just can't think of it. But it was really there to keep President Johnson from being able to get rid of Secretary of War Stanton. That's what they were trying to do. And President Johnson fired him. And in the intermediary guy they put in there was Ulysses S. Grant. And then they were going to put a new guy in there. And Congress impeached him for it. And the House impeached him. And the Senate vote was 35-19. One vote. He survived by one vote. If that goes 36-18, that's 2/3 and we're done. Ball game. He's gone. One vote he survived it by. And what did he really do wrong?
He annoyed somebody.
Well, he violated a law that Congress had passed, But Congress passed a law that really, how do you handcuff the president and pick and hit? It's his cabinet.
Ask Adam Schiff.
You have passed a
Yes,
law
yeah,
that says you're
yeah,
not allowed to
right.
do something. I mean, you just, but that's what they did. And so he survived impeachment. And like I said, Nixon was going to be impeached, but he made it, luckily. The problems
I
they're
have a
going to...
quick question. Excuse me.
Yes.
All right, it is quarter of. Do you want to just listen to him for another 15 minutes? Or do you want to start Q&A? Because it's 7 o'clock, we get dessert, okay?
No, keep going.
Keep going. Keep going until 7 o'clock.
It's not a C, it's a T. It's the Tenure of Office Act.
There you go.
That's
Tenure
what
of
it was.
office, that makes
Pulled it up
sense.
for me, thank you. It's 1867 though, right?
1867.
Yeah.
March.
And, see, the only ones I remember is February and March in 1913, because the 16th Amendment was ratified in February, the 17th Amendment was ratified in March. By the way, the two worst amendments in the history of the country, but I digress. And so we're going to impeach the president. I gave a speech about a month ago, and everybody got fired up and said, I can't, are they going to impeach the president? Yes! They only need a majority in the House, and they have got their blinders on to impeach him. Now, an interesting thing happened. They came out and they said, we're going to go ahead and introduce articles of impeachment, and then we're going to argue them, and then we're going to vote on impeachment, which is supposed to happen tomorrow. When they let out that they were going to introduce these articles of impeachment, and these are the two articles, and I'm watching, and they said obstruction of Congress, and which I mean, I'm not going to be honest with you, I just laughed. I started laughing.
It is, it's very.
And then they said abuse of power, and that's with his dealings with the Ukraine. But where's the bribery? Like the president said, where's the bribery that they had evidence of? Where's the collusion that they had evidence of? Adam Schiff's been telling us for 3 years he's got all this evidence of these things, yet we've never seen any of it. One of the guys, by the way, if I would have actually been elected to Congress in 2010, I'd have been on the House Judiciary Committee. And I would have just been, oh,
You and Jim
man.
Johnson.
You would
I
have had
just-
fun.
I would have enjoyed myself. That would have been a lot of fun. And I would have felt bad if Adam Schiff would have told me to pipe down. That would have gone well. Because I don't care. What are you going to do to me? We're going to kick you out of Congress. Whatever. I had a job before I went there. I'll get another one. I'm okay with that. The public's going to know what you're doing to people. But one of the questions they were asking is one of the congressmen asked what department the whistleblowers memorandum came out of. And Adam Schiff stopped him before the only guy that had any firsthand knowledge could answer it. He said, we need to protect the identity of the whistleblower. And the congressman said, well, if he's already testified he doesn't know who the whistleblower is, how can him telling me what department it come out of give me the name of the whistleblower? He just testified under oath that he doesn't know who he is. So how can he say anything that's going to tell me who he is when he doesn't know who he is? And it's a great question, because the answer is, I'm lying, I know who the whistleblower is. That's the only thing you can say, because you're done. There's no way to answer that question. And when they did that, that guy just froze. And Adam Schiff just said, move on to another question, and that was it. It was just shut it down. And I said back, I think you were at my other thing that I did in Globe, weren't you? The other talk I gave? Yeah, Brenda, weren't you there?
I was.
I said the first witness I'd call in the Senate would be Adam Schiff. That's what I said this was over a month ago. And I said, that's who I'd call. I'd drag him there, I'd put him under oath, and now I'm going to start asking you questions. Because you've spoken to the whistleblower, you knew who he was, you met with him, you helped him get a lawyer, I believe you helped him draft whatever he needed to be drafted, and the reason you did all that is because you can hide behind the whistleblower statute, and we never get to know who it is. It could be a fictitious person and you never get to find out, and that was
Forgot
their goal.
something. He had a copy of the transcript.
Yeah,
Can Adam Schiff, if he was subpoenaed, can he take it to court to
Yes,
refuse
absolutely.
the service of the subpoena?
You bet.
Okay.
Everybody has that right. Even if the subpoena's done, you go to court and then the judge will say, no, that subpoena's good. You have to go. Because you have to say why you don't think the subpoena applies to you. The President of the United States uses executive privilege. And he has that right. That's what he put forth. And in my opinion, Congress knows that the courts are going to rule against him and say he has the right to do that. So rather than go to court, let's just hurry up. Again, we have to hurry up and impeach him. We have to hurry to get this done. And I told Brenda and the whole room 6 weeks ago, Adam Schiff would be who I'd call. That'd be my first witness. And I would just give anything to be able to do that.
I heard that the Senate isn't going to have any witnesses.
They probably aren't.
Think they're gonna
They probably aren't.
To
And
dismiss?
the reason, and these are the problems, and this is, I agree with the president. I understand where he's coming from. Because I was a criminal defense attorney for 10 years before I ran to be the county attorney. Yeah, mostly because all my people were getting really good plea deals, and I'm like, this has got to stop. I live here. I don't want that guy living next to me, but I got to do the job. He's a wonderful man. He's got a nice sweater, Judge. Give him probation. And then the judge gives him probation. I'm like, he lives down the street from me. That's terrible. I don't want him in my neighborhood. And you really start to feel bad, as I did as a defense attorney. It just ate me alive. And finally, I said, I'm done. And I had a bunch of my high school kids that I coached over the years who ended up overdosing on heroin and dying. And when you go to funerals for 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds that last week you were coaching and this week you're watching them put them in the ground, I had to be on the other side at that point. I had to focus my energy on that. And that's why I just hammer people for drugs. I don't care. When people say drugs are a victimless crime, hogwash. That's the most victim-oriented crime there is. Every part of it is victim. Homicides, assaults, everything is because of drugs. And if you can eliminate that, you can eliminate all the other stuff. And so when I sit there and I watch these people talk and I watch their arguments and I watch what they're saying, it's upsetting because they're just wrong. And you can't object to a subpoena. I have people do it all the time. We subpoena people and they object. And we have a hearing and the court issues an order that says, no, you got to give them the stuff.
But why are they not going to have anybody testify?
Because you don't need to. There's two things that can happen. And this is what I used to tell all my clients when I had them. When the case would be dismissed, my clients would say, no, I want to go to trial because I want to show how innocent I was. Now I can understand, and that's what the president wants to do. In my opinion, the president wants to have a trial in the Senate so he can expose what he feels is the corruption. That's what he wants to do. He wants the world to see it, and he wants to basically be vindicated. The House would actually love nothing more than for the Senate to dismiss it. The Democrats would love that, because then they can say, see, we tried, and there's the Republicans covering up for their Republican president. That's what they want to do. So it really, to me, it's a tough decision to make. Because if I was the counsel of the president, it would be hard for me not to say, sir, you just want to get this out of the way and get it over with and move on. You just want to get it done. And if there's nothing here, then you can have the dismissal. But what witnesses are going to be called? The Senate's going to use the federal rules of evidence. What witnesses do you call? Those three constitutional lawyer professors? They can't testify. Who else is going to testify? All those people they brought in, they can't testify. The ambassador, she can't testify. There's only one guy that can testify. There's only one guy that has actual firsthand knowledge of what happened. And he has already said under oath, the president made it very clear to me that there was to be no quid pro quo. You're done. That's it. Because you don't get, hearsay can come in. There's about 17 exceptions to hearsay. When you watch Law and Order, and somebody stands up and goes, hearsay, and the judge goes, sustained. Well, there's a little more of a conversation than that. Usually the judge will look back over at the other party and they'll say, excited utterance, judge. Admission by an opponent, judge. And those are all exceptions to hearsay. An admission by an opponent is if, and hearsay is a statement taken out of court to be used to prove the truth of the matter asserted. So if Bill says, I was drunk when I hit those people, and he tells me, but that's hearsay, that's out of court. But Bill's the opponent in the case. It comes in. If Bill tells you, I was drunk and I hit those people, you can actually testify to what he told you. Because he's saying it, and he's the defendant. He's a party. It's an exception to the hearsay rule. There's a bunch of them. Excited utterance, the police arrest somebody and they say, I didn't know there were 5 bullets in the gun when I shot those people. And then you take them down, and then you Mirandize them and you take them in, and then the lawyer will say, I'm going to move to have that statement excluded, Judge. You know, he wasn't Mirandized. So it's excited utterance, Judge. He just said it. There's nothing we can do about it. It's hearsay, but it's out there. So there's all kinds of different things that you can do to get around it. But the Senate's going to follow the federal rules of evidence, which means there's not going to be any hearsay. And once there's no hearsay, you have no case. You just have one guy who's already exonerated the President of the United States under oath in front of Congress. So we're done. So I can understand why the Senate's looking at it saying, we're not even going to do this, because it is a waste of time. Now, it would be hard for me not to do it. There'd be multiple reasons why I'd want to do it. One of the bigger reasons is because in the event they have a trial in the Senate, then Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have to get in their battery-operated cars and go back to Washington and sit there for as long as it takes, because they have to. If they don't, that's it. And the Constitution doesn't read 2/3 of the Senate. It reads 2/3 of the Senate present, which means you have to be there. So you can't just not show up and then show up and go, oh yeah, he's guilty, and just vote. It doesn't work that way. And the senators are under oath or affirmation when they sit as well. So there's all kinds of, it's much more complicated. It's much worse than what you can see in the circus that's been going on.
With that being the case, then could the Democrats sit it out?
What do you mean, just sit out?
Just sit out. All the Senate Democrats just sit out.
Yeah, they could do that. And then he'd be exonerated on a, 50
But then
votes
they'd
to
come
200
back and
votes.
say, see, they're covering up.
Yeah, but you sat out, though. That's not a
That's
good
true.
thing, because you willfully, I've done court cases where I've had people get ridiculous. I had a defendant tell me what I could go do to myself and my mom, apparently. It was horrible. And the judge just said, you're gone. Thank you. You're leaving. And so they took him out of the courtroom and they left, and they went through the doors, and the judge said, well, the defendant has voluntarily absented himself from his own hearing. What do you want to do? I don't know, $10,000 bond sound about right to you, Judge? Yep. Because he left. He did that to himself. And so that's what Judge Scales did. That was kind of funny. Called Judge Scales a bunch of names, too. That's not smart, by the way. Just FYI. Don't ever do that. That never ends well. Nobody ever cusses out a judge and then shows up later and goes, surprisingly the hearing went well. It doesn't.
Has anybody ever convicted that party of being smart?
No.
Okay.
No, it's really hard to watch. Like I said, this is not a Republican or Democrat thing. What's going on? This is an outrage. What's going on? And it's sad to me that the Democrats, that the majority of them are just towing the line and trying to find out reasons and excuses as to why it's okay to do this.
The Senate is constrained to use the federal rules of evidence. Why isn't the House constrained to use it?
Because they can make their own rules.
They made their own rules, yeah.
They can make their own rules. Why did the House make a rule that the Republican Party, that President Trump was not allowed to call witnesses?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They did.
The House made a rule that just basically will shut down any Republican congressman who starts asking questions. We just do whatever we want. You make the rules. See, in the Senate, nowhere in the Constitution does it say a law passes, it goes to the House, we all know it goes to the House, it gets approved, goes to the Senate, it gets approved, goes to the President to be signed. That's just the Reader's Digest condensed version there. But in the Constitution, it doesn't say how. They make up their own rules. In the House, majority votes passes legislation. In the Senate, it's 60 votes. That's their rule, not the Constitution. The best part, and really the genius of the founders, was they put in there that the Constitution mandates that it has to be a 2/3 majority of the senators present. That's big, because now the Senate can't make a rule to say, well, it's 60 or it's 55. It doesn't work that way. Now, I'll read this quote to you, and just tell me if this sounds like maybe what we're going through. This was Governor Morris, July 19th of 1787 at the Constitutional Convention. This is Governor Morris. This is the guy Nancy Pelosi quoted. That was hard to watch.
Yeah.
He quotes and he says, "The executive is also to be impeachable. This is a dangerous part of the plan. It will hold him in such dependence that he will be no check on the legislature, will not be a firm guardian of the people and of the public interest. He will be the tool of a faction, of some leading demagogue in the legislature. That was said 232 years ago. This was this man's fear of even having impeachment in the Constitution as a power. Does that sound anything like what we're going through right now? So when I run into people and they say things like, oh, we should get rid of the Second Amendment because the founders could never understand that we would have automatic weapons and this and this. And no, that's a guy that understood exactly what was going to happen. He knew exactly what we were going to do. And this goes right along with, I always tell everybody, we live in a constitutional republic, and a constitutional republic is governed by law. A democracy is governed by emotions. When a democracy allows the majority to take every single thing from the minority, and there is nothing you can do about it. It's a constitutional republic that has laws in place to protect the minority from the majority.
Yes.
And so that's why that's a 2/3 vote in the Senate. The other reason it's a 2/3 vote in the Senate is because the House, very quickly, the House represented the people a long time ago before we screwed it up in 1913. The House represented the people, and the Senate represented each state as a governmental entity within the federal structure. And in 1913, they allowed all of us to elect our senators. Bad move. Because now senators work for the people, and the House works for the people, and who works for the state? Nobody. Nobody works for the state. And now you want to get rid of the Electoral College and have it be a direct vote for the President of the United States. So now we want the people to elect the legislature, the House, the Senate, and the President of the United States. And now you have a democracy, and now you're in trouble. And anybody wants to know how it ends poorly. Just look in history, how democracies end. They end horribly. Nobody ever just gets up and goes, you know what, let's call it a day on this democracy. No, usually heads come off. It's a big thing. Things burn, there's pitchforks. It's just macabre. And that's how it ends. And that's why we were designed the way we are. So,
Okay.
I apologize that I don't have any more time. I have to give an electoral college speech in February down in Globe. Because I gave one and everybody said you need to give it to a bigger crowd, so they were trying to get a bunch of people there. And I go into a lot of other stuff when I do the electoral college speech, but it all kind of ties in on how all those old guys wearing really heavy wool in the heat of summer in Philadelphia. Has anybody been to Philadelphia in August? It's miserable, right? And it is. You get out of your car and you're like, oh, I'm not doing this. It's horrible. Now imagine sitting in a room wearing heavy wool, because they didn't have like cotton t-shirts with no AC. When I taught government to kids, in my classes, when I taught the Constitutional Convention, and this part of it, I would turn the heat on in my classroom and tell them all they had to bring a jacket. And by about 20 minutes in, they're just wanting to kill each other. And I said, now you get an idea of why these guys were so volatile towards one another. It wasn't just that there was beliefs, but they were hot. It's miserable there. And those old guys sitting in that room kind of knew what they were doing. And I'll take that crew any day of the week when it comes to nation building over the best we have to offer today. Because they knew what they were doing. Thomas Jefferson, if you've ever gone to the Library of Congress, he has his personal libraries there. A lot of them burned, but he's got a lot of his books there. Thomas Jefferson had tons of books on nation building. That's what these guys did. And it's because they didn't have ESPN. They just kind of went, well, let's read this. There was not 47 televisions and streaming and iPhones. They actually read books. And they learned the languages, and they learned from the past, and they read their history, and they read the classical ancient history. And that's how they got the government we got today. They didn't just wake up one morning in Napa Valley and say, let's change things.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, and I apologize for
Yeah. Now listen.
real part. Am I still standing?
Bradley Beauchamp, between football and baseball season,
Yes.
is there any time that you would be willing to come back here and then you could do the electoral college to us?
Yeah, I can do it anytime you want.
Okay. Anytime you
I'm
want,
not-
except when you're
I'm
not.
not the boss for baseball and football. I'm just the number two guy. Number two guy.
Okay.